Hey, I'm KIC. If you want more general starting tips or info about the game, see my other Marvel Strike Force videos in the description below. Otherwise, this is going to be an information-dense look at the arena, some characters, and what's possible in your first month playing the game as a free-to-play player. Those who've been playing longer will likely have different options and choices available for their arena team, but for most people, this should be a good guide to follow until they reach that point. Before we dive into my suggestion for how to build your arena team, let's set some expectations on this video. Number 1. This is a subjective video. My suggestions aren't the only way to do things, nor are they necessarily the best. How I do things works well for me. It's up to you to decide if it works for you. Number 2. My account has no extra features, characters, or anything. This is a vanilla account started on the day of the global release. No money has been spent on this account, and I'm assuming you won't be doing so either. This means I don't have Captain America, Kingpin, etc. If you do, it may change the construction of your arena team compared to what I'm about to say. However, stick with me, because there's other good info you may not be aware of. Number 3. Yes, my arena ranking is low. Yes, I've stockpiled power cores. I'm recording this video at the end of a week when I was barely able to meet the daily activities and earn 600 raid tickets to my guild. Sorry about the spotty raid participation. This isn't my primary game or account, but it's illustrative for our purposes because the account is roughly 1 month old and has a roster you can easily achieve in that time, if not more, by simple planning and maybe a little luck with free premium orbs. Caveats disclosed, let's talk about arena teams. A good arena team generally consists of characters that do a lot of damage, those who can buff or debuff, someone to absorb the damage, and characters that the AI doesn't screw up. The last point is going to be difficult, and you'll have to decide for yourself whether certain characters are worth the cost. We'll talk about some AI specifics in a bit. The actual composition of the team depends on your style, your arena shard, your roster, and your time. You may have some great arena characters, but if you haven't leveled and geared them, they're not going to be worth much. Developing a strong arena team takes time, effort, and some planning. In the early days of the game, you'll find yourself working on one character, only to abandon them for another a little further down the road. This is a wash, rinse, repeat scenario that'll likely take place for the entirety of your time playing the game. The most successful players are those who are able to be nimble and adjust their arena teams as the meta shifts and new strategies are developed. Therefore, at roughly 1 month into the game's global release, here's my arena team and why you might want to do something similar. Crossbones, Drax, Gamora, Quake, Yondu. You're going to acquire Crossbones early on through events, but everyone else you'll need to farm. Drax comes from Blitz shards, Gamora from Blitz in the Nexus campaign, Quake from Arena, and Yondu from the Heroes campaign. If you're just starting the game, you won't have these characters. Please refer to my starting out video where I cover arena team options. Now, before we cover each of these characters in more detail, here's why this is a good team in a nutshell. It has high damage from 3 characters, good debuffing from 1, sort of 2, 1 solid protector to soak up damage, sort of 2, and a summoner. It also has 2 characters the AI will royally screw up, but I'm yet to refine a placement for one, while the other you can likely swap out. More on that later. Let's talk about individual characters now and why you want them. Also, we're going out of order, so buckle up. Yondu is the easiest. He is, quite simply, game-changing. A summoner who hits hard, has a good AoE attack, and even debuffs your enemies in a roundabout way, as well as a straightforward way. On top of that, the AI doesn't screw him up too much. He is, quite simply, a top-tier character. His basic attack hits for piercing damage, which means it bypasses enemy armor. It's not the hardest hitting, but a good crit will do a surprising amount of damage. Added to that, his basic attack removes a single buff from the target. Meanwhile, his AoE ultimate can only be evaded by stealth and also does full piercing damage. Again, you may be surprised by how hard this hits enemies because at first glance it seems like it won't be that powerful because the damage percentage isn't that high, but it's piercing. It's really quite good. While Yondu does pretty good damage on his own, he also summons help. You'll either have good RNG or bad RNG with this. Generally, you'll want to get 2 Ravager Boomers, but you may end up with 1 Ravager Stitcher. Healers, as you'll find, aren't terribly helpful in Arena because you can almost always counteract that healing with a single attack. There will be times when a crappy, tiny heal can mean the difference between a character living long enough to get off an ultimate attack or not, but more offense is usually the better choice. Therefore, hope for 2 Ravager Boomers and use them to strategically shell targets you need killed quickly. The Boomer's special attack does a lot of damage and even does a fair amount of splash damage to nearby targets. This addition of damage takes Yondu from a good character to a ridiculously good character. As a final note on his summon, Yondu provides the entire team offense up when he summons. Your whole team's DPS just got a big boost. Yondu's last trick, his passive ability, is to wipe out buffs from the other team. This isn't as reliable or targetable as his basic, but it happens every turn. Yondu can remove 1 buff from the enemy team and apply it to himself. At level 5 on the passive ability, this affects 2 enemies and potentially grants him 2 buffs. As best I can tell, you can't guarantee what he'll remove, but you'll sometimes get lucky and have him remove a critical buff that provides your team an opening to focus down a high priority target or apply a crucial debuff. Technically, he does also provide a damage boost to other Ravager allies, but this will likely only come into play with his summoning because it's unlikely you're going to run a full Ravager team, especially since there are only 4 of them right now. On the hero side of the Guardian's fence, there's Gamora. She has a ridiculously large sword and is happy to chop away at her enemies. Gamora does a solid amount of damage, but where she shines is with strategic use of her special and ultimate attacks that, potentially, grants her additional turns. That means her DPS is much higher than initially expected. There's nothing to say about her basic other than it's a basic attack. Damage is pretty good, and it has a chance to chain. At high ability levels, it can chain up to 2 enemies. It has no special effects or abilities beyond this. The special and ultimate attacks are where strategy comes into play for her. You'll need to get used to how much damage each of her attacks does relative to the remaining health of her target to use her efficiently. If you think you have a good chance of killing an enemy with her special or ultimate attack, go for it. If you're right, she'll take another turn. If you're wrong, then hope that you did enough damage that someone else can clean up. Her special has a good chance to chain up to 2 additional enemies for decent damage, while her ultimate is a single target nuke with high damage that also grants her offense up. In either case, a kill with her special or her ultimate will provide her with 100% turn meter, which means she gets to immediately take another turn. It's a blast when you're able to chain the special into the ultimate, or vice versa using that offense up buff, into a basic attack. 3 turns for the price of 1 is a lot of damage. Gamora works well with other Guardians heroes. Her passive ability focuses on increasing crit chance, which is a great way to boost DPS. At level 4, all allies will receive a 5% boost, but Guardians can receive a 10% boost at level 4, while Gamora herself gets a 10% boost at 5. The proper protector of the group and also part of the Guardians crew, and thus getting a crit bonus from Gamora, Drax is here for one reason and one reason alone. He's a meat shield. He doesn't do a lot of damage, and he's pretty slow, but he will also get you 2 turns of taunting. One of the things that makes Drax desirable is that he begins the battle by taunting before anyone has taken a turn. Therefore, your opponent has no choice but to target him unless perhaps they get a lucky buff removal with Yondu, or some other character assuming such thing exists. After that turn has ended and his taunt has expired, Drax will be ready to immediately begin another taunt by way of his special ability. This is the 2nd turn of taunting, and by the time this is done, you should have killed at least 1 enemy. More importantly, he's been soaking up damage and debuffs that, if they were to target another character, would be detrimental to your team's success. Drax is pretty easy to play. His basic attack does some damage and heals him for a little damage by way of health drain. It's not a lot of healing, but free healing is free healing. His special is his taunt. With a few points spent, he'll gain defense up, which helps him soak up a lot of damage. He'll actually take less damage during this taunt compared to his initial one thanks to that buff. And with several points spent, he'll get 2 counterattacks. With those counterattacks, he'll heal himself for a trivial amount thanks to that basic attack health drain. For his ultimate, Drax leaps into the fray for decent protector damage and hits up to 5 additional opponents. He'll drain some health off each of these attacks, but again, it won't be a lot. His passive ability focuses on healing himself by a way of improving his drain. At max, his drain isn't suddenly great, but every little bit of health helps, especially when it comes at no additional cost of abilities or turns. Before we move on to the next chapter, let's talk for a moment about defense AI. This game, like every one of its ilk, is dumb when it comes to controlling your characters. Some characters are so easy to play that the AI doesn't get it wrong, like Drax. Others are somewhat complex and require some planning to make the most out of them, like Gamora. Others still require nuance to make them effective and, if played like a rabid gorilla, are wasted characters and will only serve to make your team worse on defense. If you're worried about holding on defense, you may want to rethink using them, or perhaps only use them for 4 matches and then switch your team makeup so that your last fight will leave a different team on defense for the masses. It's your call. When you first get this character early on in the game, you may be inclined to think Crossbones is awful. If you read the Reddit or elsewhere, you may see people say he's pretty good. Well, he is pretty good, but he also comes with some drawbacks. CB's basic is pretty basic. It does damage, it has a good chance for a follow-up attack to the same target, and if so, applies offense down to them. His special is something you shouldn't use. CB is listed as a protector, but don't believe it. He's actually a bomb in disguise. Still, if you want to use his special, you'll gain taunt, get a little bit of healing, and gain 2 counterattacks. Don't do this. You need him alive long enough to hit his ultimate, and if you taunt with him, he may not live that long. He simply doesn't have the health pool or the armor to be a primary protector. Detonate, CB's ultimate, is the only reason he's on your team. This does a ridiculous amount of damage to the entire enemy team and to CB himself. With a few ability points spent, he'll gain death proof for 2 turns, but all you care about is that the more points you put into this ability, the more damage he does. Detonate can literally determine whether you win or lose. On the passive side, Crossbones will gain additional health, which is handy because he's kind of flimsy, and he also provides a slight armor boost to Hydra allies. Big whoop there. While CB is great on offense, he's terrible on defense. The AI in this game generally works in this fashion. Use the ability that's charged and the furthest to the right. You can verify this with Luke Cage. He'll always do defense up before he does taunt, and they charge at the same time. For Crossbones, this means that the game will use his taunt as soon as it's available. Your Crossbones on defense is making the worst possible choice. He's making himself the focus of the enemy team before he's ever had a chance to explode on them. Bad, bad move. The only way you can not have this happen is to not use him. But considering how much damage his detonate ability does, that's a tough call. The final character in my team, Quake, is massively important primarily for her basic attack. If you haven't learned it yet, status effects in this game, that is to say buffs and debuffs, are ridiculously powerful. A faster team is one that gets off more high-value attacks and, generally, wins. Quakes Basic is one of the best in the game. With a quick whoosh through the enemy team, she does a little damage but slows the targets. At medium to high ability level, she can slow enemies for 2 turns. The best part of her attack? It hits a single target, plus all adjacent targets. This means she can easily hit half the team. Also, she's pretty fast, so there's a good chance she'll get this attack off before most of the enemy team, which means you'll get a lot more turns than part of their team will. See that enemy Crossbones? Slow him. Hit him with everything you have, and cackle while their entire team falls apart. That's what I do. To use her basic attack effectively, you need to know how it hits. Following the guide on screen, if you attack the topmost enemy, you'll hit them and their top back row compatriot. Moving down, target the top back row enemy and you'll hit them as well as the top character and the middle character. If you target the middle character, you'll get them plus the 2 back row characters, and then moving down, just invert the first 2 that I told you, and there you have it. With 2 turns, she can slow the entire enemy team. When you consider how this attack works and which positions it hits, you begin to see there's an importance to character placement in your team. More on that later. For now, let's talk about her special. This attack clears one buff from the target enemy and up to 2 additional enemies. Additional ability levels increase damage and chain chance. Quake's ultimate is pretty dang good. She hits all enemies for decent damage and applies offense down to a few enemies. At low level, you're looking at 2 random enemies, while at high ability levels, it's 5. The damage isn't great, but offense down is a great debuff. By the time she's charged for this ability, I imagine you've killed at least 1 enemy, so you're looking at likely applying offense down to at least half of the team, summoners notwithstanding. Being a shield character, Quake helps out other shield characters with her passive, and also those tagged as inhuman. Quake herself also gains additional focus, which is the trait that allows a character to provide status effects to enemies. More focus means more debuffs landing and not being resisted. Much like Crossbones, Quake is played terribly by the AI. Rather than open the match with a basic attack to a high priority target, the AI will instead use Quake's special to remove a buff or do slightly more damage than her basic does. This means that instead of slowing a good chunk of the enemy team such that your characters will take overall more turns, Quake instead does damage to a few characters and ignores one of her best abilities. Also, much like Crossbones, there's no way around this. It is, quite simply, how the AI plays. Quake, however, is so good on offense that I find it's worth having her, even if it means the AI is dumb and my team may be targeted. My roster simply doesn't have a replacement option at this time. Speaking of replacements, let's talk about possible choices. Black Widow, if you have her, is said to be one of the best characters. You'll likely see her in all high-ranking arena teams because she has a speed-up buff that affects her, Shield and Avenger allies, and a couple of other teammates. For 2 otherwise even teams in this game, speed will win the majority of the time. It's just how it works. She also does a fair amount of single-target cleansings as well as some other self-buffing by way of buff steals. She won't hit the team with a nuclear bomb, but she provides a lot of utility that improves your team in other ways. I don't have her, so I can't comment to how well or not the AI plays her. Unfortunately, to get Black Widow, you'll need some lucky orb pulls, and thus lots of power cores, or you'll need to place well in her blitz. This may be faulty memory, but I think you might be able to get some shards via milestones with her, but you'll definitely need orbs or high blitz placement to get the majority of shards. Wolverine is someone you'll get for doing daily activities. Complete them enough times, and you'll unlock him for free. Keep doing them and you'll get enough shards to rank him up. Presumably, you can go all the way to 7 stars, but I can't confirm. Wolverine does pretty good damage, but that's about all he does. Yes, he can apply bleed on crit, but that doesn't happen enough to be reliable. He can self-revive, but it's a low chance with ridiculously low health when revived. If you're relying on this to win, your team has larger issues. Hulk is just as beefy as you'd think he should be. You'll unlock him by way of achievements. He does pretty good damage for a protector and can certainly serve as a primary protector, kinda, but he doesn't start the battle with taunt. One fun thing with Hulk is that when his health falls below 50%, he gains additional damage, buffs, etc. Considering he's a protector, he's going to drop below 50%. The question is, will he live long enough to make the most out of his enraged state? At this time, he's only available via achievements, so expect to unlock him at 3 stars and keep him that way for some time. Alas, here's the big, huge green elephant in the room. He's slow. He's so slow that he's going to spend a lot of time just standing there. Also, expect to have to wait a turn to get him to taunt, which means your squishier guys are getting targeted in the interim. Hawkeye you can unlock through orbs in a villain node early on, with an additional hero node at a later time. An interesting character, he has a ridiculous 200% accuracy, which means he doesn't miss. He doesn't deal the most damage, but what he does do is guarantee damage, cleanse, apply debuffs, and even remove a small portion of turn meter with his special attack. For his passive, he has a chance to attack a stealthed enemy at the beginning of his turn as well as clear their stealth. If you're not yet impressed by his versatility, then his ultimate attack will blind the target and, at higher ability level, up to 5 additional enemies. There's nothing funnier than blinding someone with an AoE ultimate only to watch them use it and miss all or most of everyone. Of note, don't blind Daredevil. Matt's already blind, okay? Really, we can keep going for a long time about options. You have Rocket Raccoon, Elektra, Iron Fist, Kingpin, Winter Soldier, Captain America, who's said to be the best protector, and on and on. There are also lots of minions such that you may be able to make an entire faction team. The thing is, some of these characters are easier to farm than others, and I've chosen to focus on the ones that are readily available for free players. If you bought Captain America or Kingpin or Winter Soldier, your team makeup will likely look different than mine. However, I think I've made a compelling case for at least a couple of characters that may still help your team. Who you choose to replace is up to you. Consider that you'll likely want a protector to soak up damage, need some damage output, either want buffing or debuffing, and likely will want a summoner for all the extra utility they bring. Whether you decide it's worth it to use Kingpin as protector and summoner, for instance, that's your call. Just keep in mind what I said earlier. Your arena team will change, and you need to constantly work on improving it, whether that means working on existing characters or working towards new ones. And now we need to talk about arena rankings. Yes, rankings are a moving target right now for some. The top players in my shard have more than double my team's power. I can't say for certain they're whales or that they're from pre-global launch, but there's no way I can get a top 10 or even top 100 ranking. Added to that, I can drop 2,000 ranks in a day or more. It's just how it is. That we only get 5 attempts per day, and that a refresh buys you a single attempt makes for an interesting challenge. I've already talked about how some characters have terrible AI and that can make them targets. Offense in this game is definitely easier than defense. To get a team that'll hold on defense will require a lot of star levels, gear levels, ability levels, and perhaps characters the AI doesn't screw up. Also, this game is immensely popular right now and tons of people are playing. That's a combination that's rife for fluidity. Consider that you can also shoot above your team's power, though I can't say how much exactly, but I bet double is pushing it, and you can actually climb higher than you might think. Therefore, the question is, how long until you fall? If you have a strong team compared to your top ranks and you have power cores to burn, it might be worth it to refresh and climb for a while. Theoretically, assuming you can defend, you'd make those cores back in arena rewards in short order. But that's all theory as far as I'm concerned. The last thing we need to talk about is rather important and, in some ways, is burying the lead on this video. I mentioned it during Quake's review, that topic being character placement in a team. Believe it or not, how you place characters matters. Now, I can't 100% guarantee how I place my team on offense means my team on defense will be ordered the exact same way. Why not? Because you can't face yourself in the arena. That said, it still matters on offense, and once you understand how to read defensive team positioning, you'll understand which teams are more susceptible than others. Go back and listen to Quake's review if you need to know why it's important, but the main point is that where you place your characters determines who will be hit by abilities. Considering that all it takes to get an edge on another team is selecting your team in a certain order, you should spend the 5 or 10 seconds to do so. First, let's talk about how to place your own team and why. My team, from left to right, is Drax, Quake, Gamora, Yondu, Crossbones. With Crossbones providing huge damage, I want him away from Drax such that he doesn't get targeted at all. Similarly, Yondu is my friend and I don't want him to get hit, so he gets to hang with the masked guy. That means that Gamora and Quake are potentially in line to be hit at the same time as Drax, depending on the attack and the targeting. You could argue that flipping Quake and Yondu is preferable, and that's entirely up to you. Or maybe even flipping Gamora and Quake. Again, it's up to you. Considering how fast Quake is, so long as she gets her basic attack off, I'm happy. Anything else is a bonus. So how do you arrange your team in this way? Follow the guide on the screen. Essentially, going from left to right, the order is the number of placement. Far left is position 5, while center is position 1. Right back is 2, left back is 3, and far right is 4. So to get my placement, select Gamora, Yondu, Quake, Crossbones, and lastly, Drax. It's that simple. To read the enemy team, follow along on screen again. We'll be going from left to right for each row. The first character in the top row is actually the last, bottommost, character, while the second character in the top row slides in the bottom back row. Easy enough, right? The first character in the bottom row will be the topmost character, while the second character will be the middle character. Think of it as middle to middle. And the last character will be the top back row character. Therefore, if you see Captain America up top with crossbones, or Hulk and crossbones, or Luke and crossbones, and so on and so forth, this is a great team to pick on. Why? Because your opening slow with Quake is going to slow their enemy protector as well as crossbones. There's no way crossbones lives to detonate. If your enemy has another high priority target in the center position like Quake or Yondu, even better. You're going to slow them too, since you can target the bottom back row character to hit all three. Congratulations, you can probably auto this fight after you've slowed them. So that's it. This has been an insanely long video to record and edit, but it's full of information that will help you rank better in the arena, as well as do better in PvE once you start adjusting your teams. If you found this video helpful, then return the favor and share it with others on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever people use these days. Also, don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content. Turning on notifications wins you extra brownie points. Thanks for watching. See you later.